This episode of the Therapy Unmasked podcast is brought to you by the Therapy Unmasked online courses. We currently have 3 subjects available. We have feeding, occupational therapy, as well as speech therapy, with physical therapy coming soon. These courses are taught by some of the best pediatric therapists out there, and they are teaching you the tactics that they use every day in their sessions. To find out if these courses will benefit you and your family, click the link in the description or show notes to find out more.
Food needs to be fun. Like, we need to make food fun to children. We need it to not be like a stressful thing. And the way to make food fun is to play with it. You know, I know that lots of us grew up hearing like, you can't play with your food. Well, really, we should be playing with our food. That's how we're going to learn about food.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Therapy Unmasked here at Ability Innovations. And today is a really cool episode because I have brought on 2 of our very important feeding therapists here at Ability Innovations. So we have Aaron and Connie. Thanks for coming on, guys. First, diving in, I just want to kind of go over why I brought you guys on. So I'm the new marketing director here. And one thing I've noticed is the articles and the videos that bring the most traffic to our website is the articles about feeding therapy and specifically picky eaters. And I think that's interesting because a lot of parents probably struggle with that, right? That's probably the one thing most kids have in common is they can be very picky at eating. So what would you say, and this is just a question for either of you, what would you say is the difference between a picky eater and someone who has an aversion to food or food aversion?
Yeah. You want to go ahead, Connie?
Sure. There's, I actually have a questionnaire, and I brought it along that you give to parents to help them understand the difference between picky eating and when there's an actual food aversion. Usually picky eating happens, I'll have the parents fill out a list of the foods that they do eat. And if a child can eat over 30 foods, then it's just picky eating. If they eat under 20, there's a definite problem there. Also, if a child can eat different types of foods, from different categories, whether it's meat, which is usually a no, or vegetable, which is usually a no, or a fruit, or different textures. Because a lot of times kids will just want crisp, like crackers, just crunchy foods, because they're safe. You know, a fruit is going to be different each time. It's going to be sweet, sour, blah, 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 blah. So usually kids will lose that first. In a child with a true feeding aversion, they're going to stick with one type of food, and they're not going to have foods from more categories. So usually those are the 2 big ones that we can tell when there's a difference.
No, I was going to say, kind of going along that same thing. If kids are very particular about brand, shape, color of their foods, how it's presented, that's usually more of an aversion than picky eating. So if they're I have to have on my pink plate with my pink fork, and it has to be the shape of a fish, otherwise I won't eat it, then that's definitely an aversion rather than picky eating.
I've also had a child that couldn't be in the same room with a banana. And that's a real sight sensory, smell sensory, that's a real problem. So nobody could eat a banana in the room with her. And that's legitimate. There's a problem there.
So, going off that example, what would you do with a case like that? Is the goal to get the child to eventually eat the banana or just be comfortable around the
she
banana?
Doesn't ever. I don't like ketchup. She doesn't have to like a banana. There's things that we don't ever have to like. And I think that's the hard part for parents. We don't have to eat every food in the food groups. But yes, to get her to, we start with different types of smells, and can we handle these smells? And it's super slow. And I think that's the hard part for parents too. Feeding is a really slow process. But it's just getting her comfortable. Let's just look at a fake banana. Can we handle that? Just start slowly handling the sight of it first, and then the smells. And there's just a hierarchy of what we do to get to the point of being able to be in the same room with a banana.
Yeah. And I think I like to explain to parents, I like to put it in there, kind of relate it back to them. Do you eat every single food that's out there? And most time parents are like, no, I don't. And it's So it's kind of reminding them like, just because your child doesn't eat this food doesn't mean that there's something wrong with them. Like sometimes they're just foods that we don't prefer. Like, I know that there's been a couple times it's been talked about in like blog posts and stuff, but there's some people out there who have like different, like, like cilantro tastes like soap to them, right? So like, and we don't know that because you can't sense what other people are sensing, right? Like your sensory system, it's your own sensory system, and nobody else can experience the same sensory stuff as you are experiencing through like your lens, right? It's just reminding parents that like, just because everyone else in your family eats rice does not mean that this child has to eat rice. Like there are other things that they could maybe eat, and maybe it's just getting them comfortable that there's rice on their plate or rice on the table or something, but we don't necessarily have to get to them eating that food.
I always have stories, and I have told this on Therapy Unmasked. I was such a great mom. So I have twins, and I hate telling about myself. They didn't like the insides of peaches and insides of pumpkins and stuff like that. So of course, they look like brains inside of a peach, right? So of course, being the great mom that I am, I'd be like chasing them around the house. Oh, here's the peach pit, or here's the peach thing, because this is how I raised my kids to be sassy and teasing. I mean, they still love me. They're 30s and they still love me. But we find out later that there is a literal phobia of that. Oh, wow. And it's trypophobia, and it's the fear of matter of bumps and disorganized things and stuff like that. So I did not know that. So at the time when they see those types of things, they're literally feeling the fight or flight. And I was causing that with them. We don't know what's going on in their sensory systems. So that could be a little banana girl. Maybe it could also be something as simple as maybe she threw up one time when she had a banana. Maybe she's had that kind of a reaction to it, or felt sick to her stomach. We literally don't know. We just have to be really honoring of our kids, the things that they tell us that they don't want to do or they don't want. We try to get them to the point where they're not cowering in fear. My children did not. I could have scooped out the banana brains, and I could have done it a little differently. I probably did. Let's pretend I did. Just try to make things a little easier for our kids, because just honor what they're feeling, honor their.
Yeah, I love that. Like respecting your kids, honoring them. That's good language to have, because I feel like when it comes to picky eaters, a lot of times parents just expect their kids to get over it, and maybe they torture them a little bit in the sense of like forcing them to do things. Do you have any tactics that parents can do like at home? Like say you have a kid that is like not eating their vegetables for dinner, or like only wants like the dino nuggies and mac and cheese. What are some tactics you have to help them get over that?
I feel like the most important thing is making it fun. You don't want to just like throw them a plate of like broccoli and be like, hey, try a bite, right? Like make it fun. Like, hey, maybe we can make this broccoli, we can turn it into like a forest, and we can, use some things and build it up and make a forest out of it, and then get some like Parmesan cheese and sprinkle it on like it's snowing on it, or, it's something like that. Like make it fun, make it so that it's enjoyable to them, make it so that it's engaging. Maybe it's, cutting the vegetables, like, maybe like a cucumber, maybe we're cutting shapes using like little cookie cutters. Maybe it's, doing something different with it that's not really like related to food. Maybe we're going to like do some science experiment with our food instead of like eat our food, So I think that's the most important thing, is making it fun and making it enjoyable. Well, but I mean, there's lots of.
But that's what we do here. We start with, can you look at this food? Because rather than go straight to the eating, we want them to be able to touch it, to smell it, to engage with it. And so figuring out where their sensory issues are, where their sensory threshold is with that specific food. So if we can play with it, we can touch it, it's no longer a fearful food. I had a little one Tuesday outside, and he doesn't like any kind of fruit. So we just made, and this was cute for that family, we put bowls out and ice cube trays out and little things, and we were spitting blueberries and grapes and frozen peas and just spitting them as targets out there. So these things now were suddenly in his mouth instead of just in his hands. And those are foods he's not going to eat. But we got it so close. And now it's not a fearful food to him. And he literally, this was such a good thing, he actually said, I just want to try it, and took a little bite of the blueberry. He didn't love it, but he tried it without me asking him to. So it's really just making them know that these things aren't something to be afraid of, because they are. There's anxiety there. There's a lot of anxiety around new foods or foods that they just don't want to engage with.
Yeah, and another thing that I was just thinking about is one of the things that you learn when you do like feeding trainings is like when you're trying to help kids explore new foods, you don't want to change like multiple things at once about that food. So like, let's say they only eat dino nuggets. You don't want to change like the shape, the brand, the the texture or whatever. Like some are a little more crunchy or whatever, or different, breading on it. You just want to choose like one thing to change about. So maybe you're changing the shape. So instead of dino nuggets, you're changing it to just like, you maybe take those dino nuggets and cut them into circles or something. So you're not changing that much about it. Or maybe you want to change just the brand. So maybe you get a different, because there are multiple brands of dino nuggets, right? So maybe you just try changing the dino nugget brand. But you never want to change like multiple things at once. That can make it more, like fearful for a child. Like, oh, now my food's completely different than it was.
What it kind of sounds like to me is it all boils down to like being patient with your child, right? Because it's not going to happen overnight. They're not going to overcome these picky eating habits or even like food aversion, which is a little bit more serious of a topic. They're not going to overcome that overnight.
We also try to have the parents engage in not saying, just try it, just saying, what does that feel like to you? What does that smell like to you? And be super objective instead of subjective, because it puts that pressure on that child. And then they immediately go, I don't want to try it. So they might, does that feel like sand on the top of that chicken nugget to you? Can you peel it open? What does it smell like? And just let the child lead, because they need to be in charge of themselves. It feels so much more safe when they're in charge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because that's what we're brought up. Just try it. Just eat it. Take 2 bites and you can leave the table.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and sometimes like with some of my older kids, what I've done when they have like a little bit more like they're particular about a specific brand or something is doing like, and they have to be a little bit older for this to really understand it, but doing like a taste test. Like, let's get like, 3 different brands of this food that you like, and we'll get the brand that you like, or like the brand that you like, and then 2 others. And let's just learn about them and like learn about the similarities, the differences. And maybe, maybe it is actually we're going to taste it. Maybe it's not. Maybe we're just going to compare the smell this time. Maybe we're just going to compare the feel of it. So that can be something fun. But once again, it has to be kind of a little bit older child who can engage in that conversation a little bit more. Like younger children aren't going to understand it as much, but it's a fun way to do it.
And there's different ways to taste it. There's like, we can do a lizard lick. It's a little tiny lick. We can do a puppy lick. Whoa, you did great. You did a puppy lick. Or you can do a mouse bite, like a nibble. Or you can do a lion bite, and just helping them find fun ways that really isn't, or you can just kiss it, or it can kiss you. There's fun ways to engage with the food, and they feel successful, rather than you have to actually eat that whole freaking nugget that you don't want to eat. And if you don't like it, we put it on the no thank you plate. Yes, there's always a no thank you plate. Oh, we didn't like that one, so have that little no thank you plate there. And then they're in control of that.
Yeah, I love that. It's kind of like teaching the kid how to like take charge of the food and be in charge of it rather than the parent. That's an approach I've never really thought of. I kind of want to dive more into your guys' personal histories with this though. Like, why feeding therapy? I mean, it's just such an interesting like career choice. Not a lot of people really think about that, I think, going into it, and specifically like pediatric therapy. So I guess we'll start with Aaron. Like, why did you pick feeding therapy as a career path?
Well, yeah, I think I mentioned this in the previous podcast that I did, but I was actually a very picky eater. Like, my food couldn't be touching. It had to be like separated on my plate. I would only eat like certain foods, like I'd only eat peanut butter and jelly or mac and cheese or like so I was a pretty picky child. Like, did not eat like hardly anything, and if it would change at all, I like had a meltdown. So, that kind of like started obviously my history of it. And then as I was going and learning about kind of the profession that maybe I would want to go into, and found out about like occupational therapy, and then during school kind of learned how occupational therapy can help with feeding therapy, and had like a course that they offered through my school. That was the Get Permission approach. They offered that for us to take that course. And I took that course, and that's when I became even more interested in helping kids who were like me as a kid, right? Like who had that struggle with food, that maybe they're very particular about how it's served or making sure that none of their foods touch or anything like that. So it's kind of a brief history of how I got into feeding therapy.
I kind of already told a little story about me. So I have 5 daughters. And so I had the twins had that, but they eat. And then I had another daughter, my one right after them, who hated all vegetables. So I was the mom that was, you have to have vegetables. She's going to die without vegetables. What are we going to do without vegetables? Vegetables. Anyway, and I was grating carrots and putting it in the meatloaf, and I was doing all the hiding of the foods and just trying to get her to eat her vegetables. And one time, because she loved Taco Bell, and she's still, she's 30 and still has to have Taco Bell at least once a week. We almost had it at her wedding, I know.
I think we all do.
Oh my gosh. They know her order when they see her car coming. Anyway, she's in the back seat. We're getting food as we're driving, and she's like, Mom, remember my bean and cheese burrito without onions. Like, yeah, I would have forgot that, Cass. I don't know your order. Anyway, so we got her order, and she starts vomiting halfway through her burrito in the car, which is always fun for parents. So as I'm cleaning it up, I find one sliver of lettuce. And you know how they cut their lettuce? And it was like, I finally went, this isn't something she's just being picky about. Her body did this. Her throat stopped that lettuce from going down. It was a big aha moment for me that, again, I've got to honor that kid. She does not tolerate vegetables. There's something in her oral motor stuff that cannot handle the vegetable. And guess what? She is strong. She runs marathons. We found different ways to get her vegetables in. She drinks her greens, She's fine. So it kind of helped me to do that. So I think for me, I love doing this because I can relate to moms because I've been there. I've been in this. I've got to get this in. I've got to get this in. I've got to help my child with this. They have to have this, and they'll be okay. We'll help them. We'll help them figure this out. My program was a little different, AEIOU, but they have very, very similar things. And I love the main approach is to get people to eat together at the table and make feeding a fun thing for families. And food is fun. Food is great. But the biggest thing that I can bring is that my kids grew up and my kids are still okay and they're still thriving and and the things we could do better. I think my failures help moms know what not to do, but also helping to honor our kids and honor their autonomy and honor them literally trying to tell us what their bodies can and cannot handle. I think that made me just go, I could have done better, but I didn't, so I can help others do better.
I love that. That's awesome. We'll wrap up in just a few minutes here. I do have one more question, though, that I want to talk about, and it's related to Ability Innovations and how we are a play-based pediatric therapy. So I know, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but feeding therapy falls under occupational therapy, right? Which there's a lot of routes you can do, like play-based things with occupational therapy, as well as feeding therapy. And you've talked about some of that. But what drew you towards the play-based approach, and why would you recommend a play-based approach over other approaches that are out there?
Because no child wants to sit down. And I have one he's brand new, and he used to come just to occupational therapy, which if you've been in our gym, of course you want to come and play. So I don't want to go to the kitchen. I really don't want to go to the kitchen. So when we break out Pie Face and start doing Pie Face, of course he wants to go to the kitchen. So you have to engage them on their level because a child's occupation is play. So if you make it silly and fun, they're going to do it. So if you color your pasta and you're eating rainbow colored pasta, or you're decorating a plate with rainbow colored pasta hair, then suddenly I can engage in that pasta because I'm eating blue spaghetti, or I'm rainbow cheese even. I can make a grilled cheese sandwich with that because, wow, I want to see what that's going to taste like. I think you're engaging with them on their level and just making food fun instead of threatening. Mm-hmm. It's just because when they come to us, the food is threatening and feeding time is threatening. Mm-hmm. So I always like to start feeding not with let's go do feeding, let's go wash our hands. And I think that's the way parents should approach it. Not, oh, it's time for dinner. It's time to wash our hands. And I have a funny wash your hands song. That way their brain is like, oh, I get to go do the wash my hands song, and I get to splash Connie when I do that. So just making it, just stepping it up a little bit differently, just making it even begin with something funny and something silly as a child.
Do you have parents come with you when you're doing that so that they can do these kind of things at home?
I prefer that. Some parents have other kids going throughout the gym, or they've got something else going on, but I think they need to be there. They need to be able to see, because I'm not going home with them. And that's really hard if I can go back and tell them what we did, but it's really hard for a parent not to see how we're doing it or what we're doing. So I think it's better if parents do come and be engaged in the session.
Well, yeah, because then they can also do it at home.
Right.
You know,
I'll type up I had a tiny turtle song for them, but it's not the same if they don't see that. When you splash somebody.
Right. True.
That's not the same thing.
Yeah. Okay, what about you, Aaron? Why play-based pediatric therapy?
Yeah, I mean, kind of similar things, right? That obviously the kid's main occupation is play. And so that's a way to get them to be able to feel comfortable around food, is playing with it. But also, like, really, all of the feeding trainings that are out there talk about how food needs to be fun. Like, we need to make food fun to children. We need it to not be like a stressful thing. And the way to make food fun is to play with it. You know, I know that lots of us grew up hearing, like, you can't play with your food. Well, really, we should be playing with our food. That's how we're going to learn about food. You're going to see a lot more success if you play with the food rather than just sit down and be like, okay, you take 3 more bites. First off, you're going to be, actually destroying trust with food if you're doing okay, you have to take 3 more bites. But also, like, the kids aren't going to learn internal motivation to eat. There's a lot of things that are going to go on if you make it more of a stressful thing for that child. But if you make it fun, like, oh, let's see how many peas you can shoot from your mouth and get into that bucket, Like, making that fun, like, that kid's going to see food as fun as something that maybe eventually, hey, I want to try this food. Making it playful is where you're going to see more success than if you make it like a sit down. We're going to sit here until you take 3 bites. And I've had multiple parents who have come here and have been somewhere else where it is like that. They've done feeding therapy somewhere where it's like, okay, we're just going to sit here and we're going to wait until you take 3 bites of this food. Then they come here and see how we do it, and they just really love that we don't just make their kids sit and try foods. Like, we actually are helping their kid engage with the foods. And then I don't necessarily do like the hand washing thing. I kind of from like the get permission.
You
and
don't wash
also,
your hands?
Well, we do wash our hands. We don't
I'm
do
kidding.
like a fun song with it. But one of the get permission and SOS feeding programs kind of talk about making sure that the kid is regulated sensory wise. So I try to do a little bit of like, swinging or something like really sensory, like regulating prior to going into the kitchen. So that's, something else that's like playful that helps that kid maybe be ready to be able to sit down. And every kid's different. Like, some kids don't need that as much as others. And some kids really need, like, I have some kids who we probably spend like 20 minutes just swinging prior to going to the kitchen, because then they've got their sensory needs met and then they can sit down. So often with those kids, I explain to parents, like, before you do meals, you need to get their energy out. You need to get their sensory needs met. And here are some ideas of how to do that. Maybe you do an obstacle course on the way to the table. Maybe you do this. Maybe you do like a fun like yoga video or something or whatever.
Just run around the family room 7 times.
Yeah, something that helps them, because a lot of times kids struggle to just even sit at the table, right? And a lot of that comes back to they're not regulated sensory, and they have this built up like energy, right? In parent terms, they have this built up energy. If we try to just sit them down, they're like, well, I'll sit here for 2 seconds, but then I really want to go and run. So if we try to get that out prior to a meal, then you're going to see a lot more success. So yeah, anyway, now like there's different ways, like Connie does this hand washing thing. I kind of do some more of like that sensory regulation stuff to try to help that kid be ready to sit down at the table. And every kid's different. Like I said, some kids don't need that swinging prior to it, and some
I think
do.
most of them need the swinging and stuff prior to it.
Yeah, especially the younger kids. Once they get older, I feel like they learn a little bit more of how to regulate their sensory system. And so they've kind of already done it throughout their day prior to meals, but like the young kids usually haven't quite learned that skill. And so having them have opportunity to regulate the sensory system prior to sitting down is going to be very helpful as
Plus,
well.
when we're playing, we're teaching them a transition into the kitchen too, and helping parents with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that because it shows that as this kid's therapist, essentially you're tailoring a plan for them that works best for them. I love how you said all these kids are different, and there's not one plan for everyone. There's a different plan for each
and that's
people.
the same thing with the whole family setup. So both like we've done different trainings, and they all say, sit at the table, do this, do that, do this, and it's like every family situation is different. Some people, it's just not possible. They don't all sit together. They're not all home at the same time. Some children do, they say, don't have any kind of distraction, anything in front of them, any TV going or anything. Some children really need that. So you go back and say, we support you, whatever you need to do at your home. You know your children best. You're the expert on your family. So it's really, we never ever say, oh, this is the only way you can do it, and you're failing if you don't do it this way by the book. So it really is. It's very much getting to know the family, getting to know their structure, getting to know what works for them before you can actually help send them home with a plan or tell them what you think would work for them.
It's awesome. Yeah. I think we'll go ahead and wrap up. Thanks for being on today. I appreciate it. One last point is how do we know as a parent, how do I know if I need outside help? If I need to bring my child in for an evaluation or for like we do free consultations here, how do I know it's reaching that point where I think my kid might have an aversion to food. I need help. So what would you say to that parent?
I mean, if mealtimes are stressful, if you really like when it's getting close to mealtime, you just feel stressed, you feel worried, you feel anxious, you feel, you have all these feelings of like, this is not a time I enjoy. That's definitely a time that you need to seek some outside help. If, your child is eating less than 10 foods or is like super, particular about brands, how it's served, where it's served, so that'd be another reason that you need some outside help. Yeah, I'm trying to think of other.
Or even the less than 20 or 30 that we were talking about before, because it doesn't necessarily need to be, because there's ARFID, which is avoidant restrictive feeding intake disorder, which is huge anxiety around feeding, but there's also sensory issues. And sensory can be, I don't want to, if I can't touch something funky or weird, I can't put it towards my mouth. So there's other ways that we're going to go about that is just a different kind of pediatric feeding disorder. It's not any of the picky or the aversion. It's just different. So there's so many different things. But if you're stressed out about it, especially if they're losing weight, if they're doing failure to thrive, definitely those are for sure ones. And your doctor can tell you that. We've got some kiddos that have needed some scope, that their stomach has stuff going on, or one of them had to get her tonsils removed because her tonsils were too big and she was gagging at everything. So there's so many. It's a gamut. But I like just you saying, if you're stressed out around food, it doesn't have to last forever, but we just teach them how to have fun.
It's like we say on every episode here, parents, your kid's best.
Exactly.
You recognize if they need help, and there's no shame or it's not painful to just even go check it out,
Well, and sometimes you just need some more support. Sometimes literally you feel so alone. Feeding is hard. You're not just doing it once a day. You are doing it 5-6 times a day, and you are stressed out every single time. And you just need extra support to say, I am not screwing this child up. I'm really trying my hardest, and I just need to know that somebody else sees me and they got my back. Sometimes that's all you need is just support.
Well, thanks again for coming on today. I really appreciate it. I know our audience really appreciates it as well. This has been Therapy Unmasked. We've had Aaron and Connie, two of the best feeding therapists we have here at Ability Innovations. If you want to learn more about Ability Innovations, go to www.abilityinnovations.com. We have lots of free resources out there, including our Therapy Unmasked podcast, as well as lots of articles and tons that are related to food aversion, picky eating, lots of food therapy tactics that you can do at home. So there's tons of free resources for you there. As always, we do take free consultations here, so feel free to reach out. But we want to hear from you. What are some of the picky eating habits you've seen in your life as you've grown up as a kid, or some that you see your kids having? We want to see it in the comments below. As always, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate your viewership, and we'll catch you in the next episode.